My name's Andrew Hunt. I have run an MSP for about 30 years in New Zealand, about 40 staff, to about 10 million a year in services revenue. And the Get Cambium solution that we've talking about here today is something that we built for our own MSP, and we had our arm twisted by some friends and similar businesses to share it. And in doing so, I've got to meet, get to know Peter Kajawa, who is a tremendously fun person to get to know. It turns out that Peter shares a few bad habits, such as a love of red wine, which I think is an extremely good bad habit, if there can be such a thing. Peter's taken over from poor Dipple and is now running service leadership, which is part of the ConnectWise organization now. But before that, Peter, you were running an MSP. So you're going to tell us not just what the data tells us, but then you also can relay it back to your own experience and how you grew an MSP from 2.2 to 16.5 million. And you've done that both in terms of that capacity and as a mentor in the MSP Mentor Top 250. You've been recognized there. Before that, you've had a go as a went through the bar and done a law degree as well, which I think is an extraordinary shift from law to the MSP world.
You know, you'd think that it's an extraordinary shift, but understanding contracts and liability and compliance and regulations and all those things, turns out that comes in really handy when you're running an MSP as well. So it was a good skill set to have. But yeah, definitely a little bit of an unusual career path. Yeah, I joined an MSP back in 2010. And at the time I joined it, it was wholly owned by an individual who wanted to see it turned around. He was running it. It was a what service leadership would describe as a bottom quartile financial performer. We were losing a huge amount of money when I got there. It was about a $2 million MSP that was losing $1.5 million a year. And the owner was a very wealthy individual, but even wealthy individuals get sick and tired of writing checks to hold a business afloat. And so he hired me to do a turnaround on it. And about a year into that, we discovered service leadership, and we joined a peer group. We started to benchmark, and as soon as we got our first benchmarking report back, we pretty quickly realized some of the mistakes we were making on pricing and margins, and it really helped us understand how to build the business going forward. Even today, an MSP has a lot of choices in how to go to market and price and package and run their business and service their clients. It's almost an infinite amount of choices that everybody has. And so, and then back in 2010, 2011, it was a newer, you were around, it was the Wild West, early days of the managed service industry. So we were all just trying to figure it out. And so I was there for almost 12 years and had the chance to join service leadership once ConnectWise bought it, and take the knowledge that I had developed over the years and help other partners the way that Paul and team had helped us so much over the 10 years. So really fun to be here. So that's my story. Andrew, how do you go from 30 years of running an MSP and owning an MSP to building Get Cambium?
Well, I think for me, I've realized early on that businesses don't buy IT because they want to buy IT. That's a really strange thing. So the only IT purchase people would make out of fun is really the latest Apple thing. Most of us buy IT in our business because we've got a problem we've got to solve. And so that's what's driven our MSP. And we were finding ways to scale that out as we built up a sales team, found a way to systemize it. And we're at a MSP peer group, and they very kindly said, "That's brilliant. You should share that with us. Go and find a way to do so." And so that's how Get Cambium came to be. We wanted to find a scalable framework for having a structured sales engagement so that all of our team knew how to ask the right questions to find out what was driving their customers, and then to show the customer how we could help them achieve their goals by making the right recommendations and drive that out as roadmaps. And of recent, we found that the QBR is a really key part of it, which is why this webinar is about QBRs, because it's that opportunity to go back into the customer and say, here's the agreed roadmap. Can we talk about where we're at on the roadmap? It's kind of like the GPS in the car. Having the speedo in the dashboard telling you how you're going is one thing, but having the GPS saying, well, actually, we're going in the right direction. In your case, Peter, we're heading from home to the Green Bay Packers to watch the game. We're heading, north or south or the right way rather than east or west and in the wrong direction. Is just so crucial. And I think you've got the data that can help us to get some evidence to that effect.
Yeah, I'd be happy to show you that. And I totally agree. Prior to taking over the MSP that I took over, I was a CEO of a financial technology firm for 7 years. And one of my great frustrations running that business was the lack of predictability of my CapEx budgeting for IT every year. That every year I would get a number, and we'd come up with a number based on past year's spend, and my IT people and my outsourced companies would tell me, give me some number, and then lo and behold, 2, 3 months later, Peter, I know we didn't talk about this at the end of the year, but we have this thing that you have to do, and it's going to be 30,000. And 6 months later, we've got this other thing, and I've believed since I took over running an MSP, I believe it to this day, that if you are doing QBRs every quarter with your clients and you're really having business discussions, that CapEx and IT and OpEx and IT should be unbelievably predictable. I should know as a business owner a year out, 18, 24 months out, and I shouldn't have to do one of these with my budgeting every year to gauge what I should be spending on IT. So I think it's a failure of the industry that so often is the case. And maybe a different positive way to look at it is it's an opportunity for those who are doing it well to really meet a customer need head on.
I couldn't agree more, Peter. There's no fun being a CEO of an organization having to go back to the board and say that CapEx budget we approved isn't adequate. We need to go again. Boards and shareholders in particular tend to get a bit grumpy if you do that.
Yeah, and there's always going to be some unexpected items, but those should be the exception, not the norm. And I think for too many customers out there today, it's the norm. But you asked about some data, and I did bring a little bit of data along. It is July, so July is mid-year of the year, and it's known for all sorts of things in the U.S. for the 4th of July and fireworks and all those things. And of course, it's known for the time of the year that we release our annual profitability report, Andrew.
It's a great report, Peter. We poured over it earlier this week, last couple of days as it's come through, and had a good look at it. And I think what it tells you. So for folk listening in, service leadership gathers data. You're the largest index of benchmarking tool of MSP data in the world. You survey. How many MSPs do you survey there, Peter?
Well, we don't release sample sizes because for a variety of reasons. One of them is that no sample size is ever the right one for some of the skeptics out there in the industry. But we have the largest sample size, and we have providers in 10 different business models, predominant business models, the two largest being managed service provider and VARs. But we have 8 other business models that we benchmark as well. And we do it every quarter. It's worldwide. I think when we looked at it, we have the exact description in our annual report, but I think last time we looked at it, over the years, we've had providers based in 102 countries. And so it's truly a worldwide sample. And every quarter, this is where we pull the data that I'll talk to you about, but every quarter, anybody who benchmarks with us puts their data in, and it's primarily financial data, some operational data. They put it into the system, and then every quarter they get a report back that shows them how they did relative to the top quartile performers in the industry. So right away they can look at it and see how are we doing, where are we doing well, and what should we keep doing well on and not change, and then what do we need to change to get better. So anybody who wants more information on how to do that, you can reach out to your ConnectWise rep, or you can go to our website, service-leadership.com, and we can get you some more info quickly. So the data that we're talking about in the annual profitability report, if you email service leadership info@service-leadership.com and put get Cambium in the subject line of the email, we'll send you a link. We have a free executive summary that's coming out in the next week, and we also I've got a few slides I'll be showing you here that we can send out to you as well, so you can have a copy of those. And these slides are all straight out of the report. So a few things that I thought might be a little bit interesting today to talk about. One is, with you being based down in New Zealand and the Australia-New Zealand market, we added a section this year in the report analyzing some of the differences between your market, Europe, and North America. And so there's two slides that I have here. One is showing compound annual growth rates and revenue, infrastructure services, which includes managed services primarily, product gross margin, dollars, and sales and marketing dollar spend, growth in that as a percentage, general and administrative, the growth as a percentage, and then EBITDA dollar growth as a percentage, or EBITDA dollar growth straight up. So what you see that I think is interesting, a few things, and we'll go to the next slide that'll break it down a little more. The first one is that every region has some pros and cons. That I'll hear from folks in Europe or Australia that, boy, I wish we were in the U.S. That in the U.S. the managed service providers are making way more money, and the industry is an easier industry, and there's definitely some differences between the markets. You can see, for example, in revenue growth, North America is growing a lot faster. APAC, Australia, New Zealand is second, and EMEA is third. But for sure, we're seeing a faster rate of growth. And generally what we're seeing is, we think the industry and the customer base adoption is probably 3 to 5 years ahead of Australia, New Zealand, and ahead of Europe in North America. That just, when we look at those markets, they look very much like the US and North America did 3 to 5 years ago.
Peter, as we look at that slide you've got there, you and I were talking about this earlier on, the product gross margin note there. I was speculating that the adoption rates of cloud in APAC are relatively high because it's been driven by massive rollouts of fiber to the home, and to even the smallest of businesses are on pretty fast fiber connections. So they've seen significant uptake in 365, G Suite, and the like. Very few servers. Most products have moved not just infrastructure as a service, but then actually transitioned into software as a service platforms. So I think we're probably seeing the way that businesses in APAC consume technology is very different to what it was just 5 years ago. I don't know how that sits in the other jurisdictions that you've got there, but it's certainly, I think, consumption patterns are changing.
Yeah, I think you're right. So cloud and 365 and other recurring revenue cloud products, those sit in product. And so you're definitely seeing that in North America and in APAC, not so much in Europe. But when we look at infrastructure services growth, it doesn't match up to that. So what I would have expected to see is the highest for that in North America and the second highest in Australia, New Zealand. And the services growth is behind in Australia, New Zealand. So what that tells me is that when we survey partners, about half of them are adding a services layer on top of the cloud product. So 365 most common. We'll see partners adding an administrative fee or a logistics fee or a management fee, something like that. Or they're putting it into their fully managed offering and building that service revenue in. And that's going to protect their services gross margin going forward. The concern with providers today that we hear a lot is we see way too much excitement by MSPs about the growth in their recurring revenue from cloud. And specifically, I hear a lot that it's great, I'm getting this revenue built up and we're getting 16%, 17% on it, 18%, and we don't have to do anything. It's great. It's plug and play. And yeah, except the problem is that's a VAR model. And so what the VARs will tell you is that your providers who are giving those margins are not necessarily going to maintain those margins over time. He who giveth, he who taketh away. So you've got to make sure that you put in services gross margin on top of that that you can really control. And so regardless of what happens with the vendor, you're in a good position to really control that margin. And part of the important
the best way to
Go
do
ahead,
that, of
Andrew.
course, Peter, is to find out what your customer values. To say to your customer, you can buy your 365 or your Azure from anyone, but if we as your MSP are your true partner, we understand the goals you've got for that, and we can help you make sure that you achieve that. If we've asked the right questions, we can find out what you want to achieve and make a plan with you to do so.
Yeah, you bet. I'll show you some sales slides, but to your point, what's really important is that in the sales process early on, that the MSP is identifying who's a strategic buyer and who's a price point buyer, and really walking away from the price point buyers and building a process that makes you really attractive to a strategic buyer. So who's a strategic buyer? Well, it's a buyer who is willing to pay more to get higher quality and knows and really understands that this is going to be critical to them achieving their business goals. That without a successful relationship in IT, they can't move the business forward. And so those buyers, they think differently. If you're a price point buyer, you just want the lowest price IT. I don't want to have anything to do with it. I just want to leave it alone. And so one of the ways that you can do that is by building a QBR process that requires C-level participation in the QBRs every quarter. And don't be shy about that. Tell the prospect about it early on in the cycle and let them know, hey, if you do business with us and you're a fit for us, and many are not, but we'll let you know. But if you are, one of our requirements is that we're going to meet with you every quarter in a meeting that's going to add real strategic value to you. And here's why. Here's what we're going to talk about in the meeting. And you need to be there. And if you're not there, I can't do my job. So I need to know that you're going to be there. And put that into the SLA. I mean, it's part of the service delivery. If you do that, you're going to attract buyers who are going to be willing to pay more. It's really important. As you look at this data differentiating between the markets, you can see the differences in service gross margin. And you can see how much companies are spending as a percentage of gross margin dollars on sales and marketing. And so in this case, in North America and in Europe, they're spending less to get a client. And those clients in Europe have higher service gross margins. So that's really ideal. 49.8%. Today, best in class service gross margins about 51.9%. So in Australia, New Zealand, we're way under that. In North America, we're way under that. And that affects profitability hugely. If you look at all of the markets combined, I'm not going to go through all of this line by line. I'm sure your audience will be happy to hear that, Andrew. But I will hit on a couple of things, and we have a deep dive on all of this in our annual report. What you see is that the best in class are adding the fewest new customers every quarter. The median are adding the most, the best in class or the bottom quartile are right in the middle. But the quality of that revenue is the highest from the best in class. And you can see that on the service gross margin line F21. And the managed service gross margin for best in class, 52.4, bottom quartile, 42.9. And if you go one line below that, you can see the cost for every one of those new customers. And people say 26,000 to 31,000. Are you crazy? Well, no. If you add in your sales and marketing labor, your commissions, your marketing cost, if you have a marketing agency, website, HubSpot, all of these different things that companies spend money on, if they really look at all of that in totality, and if you're an owner doing sales, then you need to look at your percentage of your time that you're spending on sales and what you're paying yourself, and you need to count that too. It counts. If you put all of that into the mix, it's expensive to get a new customer in our industry. It's 26 to 31,000 a customer. So you better be getting customers that are willing to pay for what it takes to service them effectively and the amount of gross margin you need. And you can see at the very bottom that the best in class, that they're using about 45% of 3 years of gross margin to acquire that client. The bottom quartile are using 80%. So by the time you pay your rent and your other overhead costs and your accounting costs and all that, that's why the bottom quartile are all losing money today. There's just not enough gross margin left to pay the rest of the bills. So really critical that you're attracting the right customers, and then you're doing the things during the relationship to keep gross margin costs as high as possible.
One of the things, Peter, we see when we ask MSPs how they acquire customers is quite often it's through referrals. They sit there in various sales groups. You go to say, how hard is it to win a new customer? What are you doing? Is your marketing working? And to a large extent, that's there are marketing activities that work better or others. But I think the theme that I hear over and over is actually our best customers come from referral. And of course, for a referral, that means the person who's offering you up as a referral likes what you do. They have confidence in you to recommend you to their friends. So the things you do add value to their business in such a way that they like it. That comes back to being able to make sure you know what's important to them, you're delivering it, and you're demonstrating it. So in terms of these QBRs, I'm really curious to know what are the traits and activities that you've identified, and I know your report shows it, that make QBRs more effective.
Yeah, so we have a special section in the report that focuses in on 5 of our OML traits out of Sleek. And one of them is QBRs. And so we've got a bunch of analysis in there. But what was interesting, we looked at the difference in profitability. So if you're not doing any QBRs, you're very, very minimal profitability. OML 5 means I'm doing a QBR every single quarter with my clients. It's including the C-level at those clients, and I'm delivering strategic content. I'm not going in there and just doing a ticket review and just talking about how many viruses we prevented last quarter and all the things that people sometimes do in QBRs when they're doing them wrong. So I'm going in and I'm talking about their business goals. If it's the end of the year, what are your goals for next year? Have you set a budget yet? Have you updated your strategic plan this year? Are you growing? Are you planning on adding any new locations? If so, where? Is there any technology that you're talking about that that would help you in the business? And if so, let's talk about it. So if you're having those conversations and you're having them every single quarter with your clients, then you're OML 5. And so you can see if you're OML 5, 24.7% EBITDA, 24.4 adjusted. OML 3, which means you're doing QBRs at least twice a year, and at least once a year, you're going to have somebody a C-level in those. So basically, you're doing some of those things well, but you're not doing it on the same regiment. And you can see it's half the profitability. right? It's a dramatic difference. What was also interesting is if you look at the service gross margin, managed service gross margin, it goes from 37.5 up to 53%. So better than best in class at OML 5. And we often forget about product, right? If I'm doing QBRs right, I'm doing a roadmap on all projects and OpEx and CapEx, and I'm getting approval in those meetings for those projects. So there's no surprises to the client. They've budgeted for it. They are expecting it, and I'm going in and they're approving it. As a result, they're less focused on price and more focused on quality and on me administering all of that correctly. And you can see the impact on product gross margin. It's 2x at OML 5 versus OML 1. So I think the other reason why it's so much higher at OML 5 is, like we said earlier, if you're doing all of the things that drive OML 5 here, you're going to be really appealing to that buyer who's willing to pay more, right? It's just going to make you look a lot better.
You're going to have a better customer relationship because you're going in there. So the QBRs, it's got to be regular. My experience of doing QBRs and getting the C-level exec in the room is it only works if you talk about the things that they care about. But then in my own experiences, I tried to grow out my MSP and to have a larger sales team to transition from owner-led sales to hiring first, second, third, fourth, and I think we're at 7 now in our MSP business and sales. Is that it's quite hard to scale that process out. Most of us are technically led. We're technical businesses. Most MSP owners have sort of found a way there through being their vocation, their career, and the people that they're surrounded by are similar. And so the challenge is that we're wired to see the wires. I think the opportunity for MSPs is to learn how to have that business conversation and to have it every single time. And that's why we built Get Cambium, is to scale out that process of trying to be that OML5. The evidence is clear, Peter. You've shared that with us. And it's irrefutable that if you can have that business conversation with your customer and bake that into your process, you're going to be more successful. But you asked why we did this, because it's hard to do that. And we had to build a tool. We built MSP businesses to scale out doing IT service. We built tools to automate that process, RMM tools. We need to do the same thing in our sales tool. Have you seen any evidence to support automating the sales process?
Well, for sure. If you can do that, you can drive the regimen of it. You can scale it much better, and it's gonna reduce your overall cost to acquire a bit. So if you don't do that, it's hard to ever scale up. You said you have 7 account managers or salespeople. That's one of the common challenges that I see with MSPs, particularly at a certain size. One of the toughest challenges is moving from owner sales to having one sales rep. The next barrier comes in when you start to have a sales team that has sales management. Well, then you really have to be using tools. Otherwise, what you find is you're going to have every one of those salespeople that are going to do their own version of whatever they want to do, right? And then your customer's not getting a common experience. And so that wouldn't be any different than if you had different support people, and depending on who they called in, one support person would help them on one technology, and the other one would say, "Nah, I don't work with that. I only work with this brand of firewalls and call back later," right? Um, you would never do that in your service operation, and you know that if you did, you'd never get efficiency and high customer quality results. So sales is the same way.
Yeah. I think you've got to have a process and automate it. So that's what Get Cambium is all about. We take the view, ask the right questions, find out what's driving the customer's goals, what's important to them. Then you can make recommendations from your service stack, or work with specialist partners if it's something you don't do, to add that value to the customer, to build that relationship, to make sure they are in that high value. They're hard to win, so let's make sure that we treasure that customer and maximize our relationship with them. And then you will, to your point and to the evidence you've shown, you will win more business. So uncover what your customer needs, have a roadmap, come back to that roadmap in your QBR process, Don't do the operational dashboard that so many do. Don't show them the viruses, the patching status, because they kind of assume that. My power company doesn't come around and say, "Hey, Andrew, every time you turn on the light switch, the light worked. Aren't we good?" That's not the conversation they ever
Right. Let's
have.
talk about the wiring and how the
Yeah,
voltage moved. Yeah. It's
yeah.
yeah, if you I I think these are the fun conversations. So when I ran an MSP and talked to our sales team, they would oftentimes at the first meeting struggle with a prospect. What do I talk about? How do I get them to open up about their technology needs and what's going on? Well, every business person loves to talk about their business. If you've got the right person in front of you, if you have the owner or president or CEO, and you start asking them about their growth plans and what got them here and how did they become so successful and what are they looking to do next year and the following, they love talking about that. It's like once you get comfortable with them, asking them about their family and favorite sports teams and the so ask. It's a really comfortable conversation for business people to have. And at first, when you start asking about some of those things, they might not fully understand, but just say it's important to understand this stuff because otherwise, I can't do my job. I'm not here to sell you tech. There's a million companies out there that can do that. I'm here to really help you achieve business objectives. So I need to know you. I need to understand your business, and business people love that discussion.
I think that I couldn't agree more. It's certainly been my experience over 30 years. Hey, for folk who are joining us on the webinar, we've got the Q&A open. If anyone's got any questions, please put them either into the Q&A or into the chat, and we'd love to answer those for you. Peter, you've offered to make the executive summary of your report available to people who email in. So you had a slide there, the email to info@service-leadership.com. Put Get Cambium in the title. You'll send that to them. And we've been recording this webinar, so we'll post this on our website and send it out to the people who registered as well, so they can play it back at their leisure and share it with their colleagues.
Yeah, I look forward to it. I'll be coming over, by the way, to your neck of the woods in a couple of weeks, Andrew.
Yeah, I'll see you
So,
there.
yeah, we'll be talking about all of this in great detail. We'll be doing a security seminar in Sydney in 2 weeks, and those in the audience who are in Evolve I'll be at IT Nation Evolve. So, really looking forward to it. Looking forward to seeing you in person and drinking some more red wine.
It'll be great. I think the problems that we're talking about are common, whether in Europe, North America, or APAC, as we are. And I think my observation is as our clients transition their services into the cloud, as they consume more software as a service packages, they're actually consuming more IT than they've ever had before. They've now got HR systems, they've got logistics systems, they've got all sorts of software that was previously, in 10, 15 years ago, was just not practical for them to have. And today it's easily consumable as a service. In fact, quite often they don't even know all the tools they've got because people just sign up for them on their credit card.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
using more IT.
yeah, for sure. The trend, we get into this in a lot of detail. 2022 was a great year for the industry, and it was the third consecutive great year for the industry. So, COVID and hybrid work environments and additional security issues, all of this has created a lot of opportunity, as has the rapid transition to the cloud. That's been really transformational. The consistent factor, though, is that businesses need help figuring out how this relates to their business, and the users need help in making it all work. And I remember when I joined my MSP in 2010, first time I went to a large industry event, it was really depressing. All of the MSP owners and VAR owners who were there that I was talking to, I was new to the industry, and talking to them, and they were all like, why'd you come into this industry? We're about to all be out of business. The cloud is going to put us all out of business. And so everybody's really afraid of the cloud back then. And vendors were talking about how easy it was going to be and nobody would need IT help anymore. And Well, I mean, we all know in hindsight how ridiculous that was. So the industry just continues to ramp up, and thinks our best days are still ahead of us.
We just have to know what our customers want us to do. I couldn't agree more. We've got to ask our customers what's important. We've got to become comfortable asking that questions. Tools like Get Cambium help you ask the question and then play it back in the roadmap to show you the value that you're offering. Peter, there's been no questions at all. Between us, we've done such a good job. We've either put everyone to sleep or we've answered all of their questions as we've been talking. But our email addresses are on the invitation if anyone wants to get in touch later on. Otherwise, I know it's getting a bit later for you. For me, it's the workday here. It's Wednesday, and we're just getting going. So I'm going to go and get into that. Peter, thank you for your time. It's been fantastic to catch up with you. I look forward to seeing you in a few days' time.
Sounds great, Andrew. Thanks for having me, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.